All right, let's finish up on Bitcoin because I want to get into DeFi and also NFTs. But the state of Bitcoin now, obviously we came off the highs of like 67,000, which was October. It was my 10-year anniversary show finally when it hit the highs. You know, we're back down to correction levels at 40,000. I think most of the market is now expecting some type of sideways movement over the next couple quarters. I know you've come out and said, I can't stand people that call Bitcoin to go to $250,000, Bitcoin to go to $1 million, because you said something, and Jordan, I quoted you to my academy on Monday. I said, look, nobody knows the price of the asset in the future. They might try to convince you they know. They might have a crystal ball, and they might have a cape, or they might be an economist, or be at JP Morgan, but nobody knows the assets price of anything in the future. We know that from being on Wall Street. But this space is so new that not everyone knows that. How do you see Bitcoin? How do you talk to people about Bitcoin? And what do you see as the future of Bitcoin?
I think Bitcoin's going higher. And I think I said I thought it'd be at 100,000 by the end of last year. I said, but it could also be 10,000.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's going to 100 grand. That's why I'm long. But I think it just as easily be at 20,000 or 10,000. But I certainly think over the next 3 to 5 years it goes substantially higher. Why? I think if you look strictly at the adoption curve of people around the world, and especially institutional adoption post-regulation, I think it's pretty easy to make a case that when you take that increased demand that comes from institutional adoption, and then there's another side to assets going up and down, stocks, bonds, whatever they might be, that most people don't focus in on, and that is the withholding of supply. There's two sides to any stock manipulation or just the stock going up and down. That is creating demand, but also restricting supply. Bitcoin naturally restricts supply, and many people that buy it hold it for the long term. It's sticky. So while there's this trading all around that creates volume every single day, the vast majority of Bitcoin, when people buy it, they hold it. So I think when you combine those two things together with adoption, with the stickiness and the investment nature of Bitcoin, I believe it creates a scenario where it should go substantially higher. In addition, there's something that happens with Bitcoin every X number of years called halving, where the rewards that miners get for maintaining the system and verifying transactions and solving the problem, doing the work that actually validates a transaction. It's very separate from verification. First, they validate that others verify it, right? Once that reward, I think maybe it's like 5 or 6 coins they get right now, it's going to cut in half again. If you look back historically at these what they call halvings, they serve as inflationary events for Bitcoin. So I think that in 2024 or 5, when the next halving occurs, I think that's going to also put upward pressure on Bitcoin. But so much can happen between now and then. Like it still could go, I don't know what is zero, but it could still really go to almost worthless, and it could just fall out of vogue for whatever reason. It's always possible. Now, do I think that's happening? No, that's why I'm heavily invested in the asset, okay? But I do think that the chances of it being much higher over the next 1 to 3 years is great, and 3 to 5 years even greater.
Yeah, Jordan, you just mentioned kind of the volatility inherent in these markets. Have you ever seen an asset so volatile? And do you think humans on even a base level can process an asset being this volatile? I was telling my students the other night, I said, say you bought Bitcoin, you put $100,000 in it and it doubled the money to 200,000. And then it went back down to 100,000 to where you actually were still flat on the trade. I'm saying you couldn't actually emotionally handle that process, because you would have been trying to spend it, borrowing the money. You would have thought your future would have back down to 100,000. You would have probably be depressed, anxious. Maybe speak on that as far as the volatility, and can most humans even handle that volatility?
No, I don't think there's anything unique about Bitcoin in its volatility at all. Look at oil. Oil was negative $30 a barrel a couple of years ago. Then it goes to 150 and goes back down. Okay. Commodities and assets can be very volatile. Okay. The difference, and I'll tell you the big difference of this whole thing is that when you view it as money, you're pegging it against things like the dollar or other currencies where it's supposed to be stable. But I don't think Bitcoin, it doesn't act like money right now. It acts like a growth stock. and it trades like a growth stock. And until it gets more mature, and it's probably another couple of years when it's going to start to mellow out more, but I think it's going to increasingly become more and more stable over time. In addition, what you have now, which you never had at any point before this, is complete visibility to every single bit of volatility. 25, 30 years ago, we would have stocks that were incredibly volatile, but if you wanted to find out about it, you had to wait till the next day and read about it in the Wall Street Journal. You couldn't track it every second. People could track things every second of every day. Is Bitcoin more volatile than GameStop was? No way. GameStop was far more volatile. It went from like a dollar or two to 500 or 3 or 4 back to. So anything that's being speculated on like that is going to be inherently volatile. It's when you start thinking of it as currency, and compared to the dollar, it's very volatile, but compared to other wildly speculative assets, it's probably right in line with what it should be.
Yeah, you mentioned that transparency of information. When I was on Wall Street, and when you were, at Stratton, the information asymmetry, as Gary Gensler would say, is the reason we made money. Because on Wall Street, exactly. I was doing derivative trades. I would never ever mention a trade to anybody. So we kept all this information to ourselves. We knew the real price of an asset. The same with you with the penny stocks. And then when the customer would call, you would give them the price of the asset, and it was all right.
Exactly.
And this
the
is
inside bid versus the real bid.
Yeah, this is how Wall Street has made their money for 100 years. It's been that asymmetry of information. Now with the blockchain, like you said, every trade is posted. It's this strange new world. Now, it doesn't mean markets can't be messed with. It doesn't mean that exchanges can't find ways to make money, but that makes it fundamentally different from what Wall Street does.
Well, just remember, so like what you just said is exchanges. So when you have, listen, what's happening right now in this first evolution of blockchain is you're having centralized institutions like Coinbase and whatnot. Those are not, that's not crypto. I mean, that's actually the furthest thing. It's all internal transactions they're doing, and they're trading it like they do NASDAQ stocks over illiquid NASDAQ stocks like I did. And they're making mass amounts of money by completely, marking things up, holding things in inventory. I mean, it's just ridiculous the amount of money that's being made because of the lack of transparency. But when you talk about the actual blockchain, DeFi, things like a sushi swap, or when there's, then you have slippage in the middle, which creates money, but it's certainly like in Coinbase, it's like not even, I wouldn't consider that, that's not even blockchain.
Yeah.